class 4 of my class on discipleship, spiritual disciplines, and lessons from the Sermon on the Mount. My name is Montagne. This is the Taiwanese American Fellowship Presbyterian Church, and I assert my copyright to all these materials. I prepared them myself. So, last week, I gave you an assignment, a homework assignment, and the homework assignment was to say thank you, or more specifically, to be careful and intentional about saying thank you. Every time you said thank you all week long. All of us say thank you lots of times, but usually we do it automatically. It's just a built-in social function. I asked us as an exercise, as a discipline, to pay attention and to be careful to mean it every time we said thank you all week long. Sometimes that's as easy as just taking a moment to think. Sometimes it requires a few extra words. Thank you. I really appreciated that. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Or sometimes it might take a whole minute. You might want to say why you're saying thank you. So what I want us to do first is to start by gathering in our groups, Taiwanese, Mandarin, English, and share our experiences from saying thank you all this last week. 1, how did it make us feel? 2, did anything happen? Did anyone respond in any way that was remarkable or noteworthy or worth paying attention to? And 3, how hard was it to do? Or was it easy? And 4, can you see yourself doing this steadily and regularly and not just as a practice exercise? What would it be like, do you think, if you were able to do this whenever you said thank you the whole rest of your life? This is an exercise to try to gain a skill that becomes a life skill, a skill we can use in our lives. So let's gather in our groups, Taiwanese, Mandarin, English in the back. You got 20 minutes to talk this over. I'll give you more if you need it, but we'll start with 20 minutes and catch you back up front later. It sounded like we were having good conversation. Was I correct? Were you having good conversation? Did you have good stories to tell? From each group, what was the one best story you heard told about doing your homework this week? Okay? From each group, someone tell me what was the best story you heard. You heard too many good stories, or none of them were any good? All right. If it's one of the best, that's good enough. Go ahead and tell me.
Well, one of the stories we share is that yes, there are occasions that we miss to say thank you, and especially the expression to the spouse next to us. That's the one point that we emphasize.
Okay.
And, something tangible or a gift obviously could help, but we also point out that in Taiwanese culture versus the American culture, Taiwanese culture, a lot of occasions that we take it for granted, and it's not our culture to say it in a very explicit way. However, in this country, we feel that we have a lot to catch up to be able to say thank you, especially, let's say we go to attend a party hosted by another family. Just by saying thank you at the end of the party does not count. You have to come back and then give them a call or send a note. That seems to be the American way that we need to get into.
Yes, yes. That was classic in American etiquette. You have to send a note. Thank you at the door doesn't count. I heard several times this thing about, though, how hard it is to really mean it, or how we didn't do it every single time. One of our people said, I probably only managed to do it 30% of the time. That's all right. That's how we get started. We are busy learning a skill. And 30%, as compared to almost never, is an enormous accomplishment. If a baseball batter was hitting 30%, that'd be 300 batting average, which is considered to be pretty good. So I'm satisfied with that for us as a start, as getting rolling. I also heard some concern expressed about we're partly faking it. We're pretending. And does that mean, that we don't really care or not? And I think of a line that I heard in a movie once, where this person says about their significant other, says, I don't know if he really cares anymore or if he's just pretending. And her friend says, if he's pretending, then he still cares. Pretending is work. And when someone's doing work in order to protect your feelings and make you feel good, then that's really caring. So yes, we're pretending. But we're pretending what we really want to mean. We're pretending what we really do mean in our best selves. So it's all right that we're pretending. Because that's how we get from where we are to the place where we aren't pretending anymore. This is the kind of person we are. This is what we really mean all the time. So we shouldn't worry about the fact that it feels like we're pretending sometimes. We're just doing it because it's an assignment. That's all right. That's a step on the path from here to there. What's your best story out of the Mandarin speaking group about thank you saying?
Chick-fil-A.
Tell me.
I think it's not so much how we say thank you, it's actually the reciprocal. When they hear us say thank you, a lot of us said that they went to Chick-fil-A. When we say thank you, they actually respond to you by, it's my pleasure, it's my honor. So it's the reciprocal that we get, actually. That kind of, we had that discussion, and I thought it was something interesting.
That's not a small thing.
Right.
All right? We say thank you to one another in all kinds of minor human interactions all day long, all week long. If every one of those interactions can become a link instead of a just, that's the way we go past one another. Instead of that, it's a link. I really enjoyed working for you. I'm glad you enjoyed the sandwich. Yeah, I know it's just a chicken sandwich. We make 8,000 of them every day, but I'm glad I was able to give you one of them. If we can get to the point where we really mean it in all those small interactions, we will have a much more firm and strong web of human interactions all through our society. And we, Christians, will have done something that makes the whole rest of our society better in just a tiny way. This is part of why the scripture for this was, you are the salt of the earth. You make everything taste better. What about us in the English-speaking group? What was our best story?
Okay, I have two best stories. Besides seeing the change of the recipient of the thank you, that is share that he also changed himself. Because when he see the person really that start to smile, he was having a difficult time in the city of Depression, so don't be with you by city of Depression. Okay, but anyway, when he even when he was given a hard time, but he at the end he said thank you. Your Christmas decoration is really beautiful. The person actually smiled, and he said that he still lost 45 minutes, but when you walk out there, you feel good. You feel good that he was not bound by you and anything. So that's a true story. We have another good story. Pastor Paul was sharing that sometimes we say thank you as a middle, it's the end of conversation. Go along. And then we are so fortunate to have Linda. Linda said, he doesn't say thank you to end this conversation. He said, I'm sorry. Yeah. So Linda was saying that that he was trying to have Pastor Paul change the assignment for this week from saying thank you to I'm sorry.
I really mean it.
This is like having what they used to call in baseball a player coach. Some of the old-time teams, one of the baseball players was also the manager. Lou Boudreau of the Cleveland Indians back in the 40s, he was the manager of the team, but he was also the shortstop. This class is like that. I'm a player manager. I'm given the lessons, but I'm taking the lessons too. Almost every exercise I give you is an exercise I've done a little bit. Enough to know that it works, but not enough that I'm good at it yet. So, don't think otherwise. And you've always got Linda here to check with, and if I'm lucky, she'll only tell you the truth half the time. I want to pick up on the Sermon on the Mount. I'm going to start with the verse we used last week and proceed to the verses that we're using this week, because they all fit together, and the assignment this week is going to be built out of it too. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but it is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. All right? These are the passages that I'm working on with the exercise I gave you last week and with the exercise I'm going to give you this week. But I need you to know that, again, these are exercises, spiritual disciplines. They aren't yet the full performance. Because the full performance of these passages would be the things that we Christians do in the world to make the world differently. I mean, maybe some of us need to run for office. Maybe some of us need to change the way economics works. We talk all the time about how Christians need to take a hand in the affairs of our culture and our country and make a difference in that. And we do want that, eventually. But I focused these two passages on an exercise of noticing and affirming the good things that others are doing. Not worrying from the beginning about how we're going to do the good things, how we're going to do the great things, how we're going to do the works that all the world will see and give glory to God. First, I want us to notice the good things that other people are doing. That's why I started with thank you. And now the assignment for this next period, and Sulain handed these out, the schedule. My next class teaching here is going to be December 1st, so you've got a lot of time to work on the assignment now. The first part of your assignment is to keep working on the thank you part. Keep working on the thank you part, because you've got more to gain by it. But now I want you to add an additional ingredient. I want you to look for things that are really being done well that aren't being noticed. Or at least it isn't being noticed that they're really being done well. They're being taken for granted. And I want you to find an occasion to make sure that the people who are doing them know that they're doing something incredible. If you manage to do that once a week, you're doing good. Because now I'm not talking about a small thing, like every time you say thank you. It may be the case that saying thank you is what will make you realize, wait a minute, this is not just a thank you. This is one of those things Paul was talking about, where someone's doing something incredible and it's not being noticed. For instance, before I met Linda, I worked in Kennewick at a rental shop, and 2 blocks down there was a small restaurant. It was a restaurant that was only open for breakfast and lunch. It is still, after all these years, 40 years later, we've been married 40 years, haven't we? It is still, after all these years, the 3rd best restaurant I've ever been in my life. But they're not a fancy restaurant. It's a breakfast and lunch restaurant. It's a working man's restaurant. It's a place where people who are at work go to have breakfast or lunch while they're on their working day. They're not even working for dinner. It used to be a donut shop, and the donut shop went out of business. But when the donut shop went out of business, 3 of the ladies who worked at the donut shop didn't want to see their jobs go away. So they grabbed hold and arranged to rent the building. And they opened this restaurant. And they opened a very simple restaurant. And they did one thing incredibly right. They knew they were only going to be open for breakfast and lunch. They made only one, fresh, homemade soup from scratch every single day. A different one most days of the week. But every day you could count on it. By lunchtime, it would be ready, fresh, homemade, from scratch soup. And it was really good. Restaurants can buy soup in huge bags. I mean, and if you're serving 1,000 people at lunch, you need soup in huge bags. All that soup is awfully salty. And usually it's got too much of something in it. I don't know. It's just not as good as homemade. The rest of what these ladies did was pretty good too. But they weren't doing fancy French cooking. They weren't doing incredible stuff. But what they did, they were doing perfectly. They were doing perfectly. They were doing it so well that I rate them as a better restaurant than a whole bunch of restaurants I've been to where I paid $80 or $100 for Linda and I to eat. And I used to go there every single day. And every single day I had a turkey sandwich with mustard and onions, a glass of iced tea, and whatever the soup was. I didn't even have to order my meal. I walked in, they knew me, I sat down, they brought me the food. They knew what I wanted. The soup was still the making of it. It was incredible. And I realized this was magic. And it's exactly the kind of thing everybody takes for granted. How much do you take for granted a diner that just is open for breakfast and lunch and serves working people their meal in the middle of the working day? How much do you take that for granted? But I realized this was one of the best restaurants that I'd ever been in. And after about a year, it finally struck me that maybe I should tell them. Maybe I should let them know. Maybe they should know it. And I told them. And that's how I found out about the donut shop closing, and found out that they created the restaurant just in order to save their jobs, and found out that they stuck their own money in it to make it happen, which was why they cared so much to do such a good thing. One time, Linda and I went to New York City, and just for fun, we went to look up a church that was recommended to us by a friend of our youngest son, Nathan's. He wasn't there, but he knew about them because he bumped into them. And it was a little church, an independent church, in fact, a disorganized church. There was no organization. They didn't have a minister. It was just a group of people who met together for Bible study and to worship, meeting in a storefront that was not being rented out because it wasn't up to code. The guy who owned it couldn't rent it out, but he could loan it to these people as a church since no money changed hands. And it was a church that was full of exactly the kind of people that you don't expect to find in church. The only people I saw in there who didn't have tattoos and piercings were the ones who were black, anyway. And they were all under 30, and they were all, by appearance and by the way that they talked, the kind of people you don't expect to find in church. The kind of people you don't expect to find in church. And yet here we were, I was listening to them, and they sounded like an InterVarsity Bible study. They sounded exactly like, college kids who are new to the faith and are taking it incredibly seriously, while looking like the people you don't expect ever to walk into a church. And that's probably true. They wouldn't have walked into this church. They wouldn't have walked into the church down the road. They wouldn't have walked into a Presbyterian church because the Presbyterians would look at them like they were eggs, like they were out of place. We wouldn't have meant to. We would have told ourselves that we wanted to welcome them and be kind to them, but it would feel weird to us. And so no matter what we tried to do, we would end up not really making them feel welcome. And what they were doing was incredible. It had that rich vitality of people who are in church because they desperately need to be. And they desperately want to be. Not because their parents are making them go, not because they've always gone, not because their grandparents went to this church, but because God in heaven, life is hard. Life is hard. And without God's help, they knew they weren't going to be able to handle it. we must have spent 20 minutes there after worship was over, just talking to the people who helped make this happen and telling them how wonderful what they were doing was. I mean, and telling them that what they were doing was more wonderful than most of what I got to do, even though I was an ordained minister with a church that I was pastoring. We were still at Mount Airy in those days. We were still at Mount Airy. Because they needed to know that they were doing something unbelievable and incredible. Because they thought they were just doing something that was halfway decent and that was good enough because they were desperate. I want you to start looking out for stuff like that. I want you to take this passage about being the light of the world to say to yourself, my first job is not to be so bright that everybody looks at me. My first job is to shine the light on someone else and show someone else that what they're doing is incredible, that what they're doing is unbelievably good, that what they're doing is the kind of thing that I would say thank you for and really, really mean it. Without any effort, I'd really, really mean it. So we may want to keep up the exercise of saying thank you because it'll keep us in the right frame of mind. Because I don't want us to just pick something ordinary and give it effusive praise in order to say, hey, we did Paul's exercise. I want us to look for something where they need to know that they're doing something incredible. Because most people won't realize how incredible it is what they're doing. And I can't tell you ahead of time what that will be. I can't. I gave you a perfectly secular example and a religious one too, so that you'd know that we're not looking necessarily for specifically religious examples. We're looking for human examples. And you get this sometimes. But you got to watch out for it. I want us to be the light that shines on someone else before we start worrying about us doing something so fantastic that someone will look at us like that. It's so easy for us to take the things that Jesus says to us and the things that God says to us and try to make them something that will make us bigger and better, that will feed our own ego. And sometimes we are going to need to do things like that and run the danger of feeding our own ego, because there will be works that we will be called to do that will be that big. But before we can get there, we have to do the exercise. We have to practice the smaller skills. We have to do the lesser deeds over and over until we get skilled at them before we try the bigger deeds. And the lesser deed now is to know why we're saying thank you, and to look for the things that we can shine our light on so that other people will know that they are doing something incredible, that they are doing something that God is delighted in, that human beings would dare to do such a thing. So that's our assignment for 4 weeks from now. It's 4 weeks from now till December 1st. So keep up with the thank yous. Some of us didn't get started on the thank you. A couple of people who are watching these lessons only online didn't watch the last lesson yet, so they haven't started the thank you yet. So the thank you is an easy one, because you just have to remind yourself to keep doing it, and you don't have to get mad at yourself if you missed it. If you get to halfway through the day and you think, oh, I was only careful to do it seriously when I walked out the door, and I haven't been doing it since coffee break. That's all right. Just pick it up and do it from now on. But keep your eye open. Keep your thoughts open. Keep your feelings open. Your emotions are also a way of thinking. Your emotions are also a way of perceiving what the world really is. Your emotions are also a device of knowledge by which you know and understand what's happening in the world around you. If something that you bump into and interact with, suddenly you feel a connection to it, that's not just a casual feeling. If you feel a connection, there's a connection. Follow it up. Your emotions may sometimes be a more useful device for finding these things that need to hear your praise then your thoughts will, or at least then your linear thoughts will. Emotions are a device for knowing and understanding, not just for feeling. That's where we're going. That's where I want to pick up on December 1st. That's your assignment for next time. Let's just have a word of prayer. God help us. God help us, please. We really do want to do good. We want to do what's right. And we want to do what makes a difference. But we need your help. We need your help. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.